Hey, and welcome back to The Art of a Life Well Lived. I am Christine Regan Lake, and it's good to be back here again. If you have not subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to do that. If you enjoy my videos, I am trying to grow my channel to get my message out to those who need to hear the things that I'm trying to share. So I would so appreciate that. And those who are already subscribed and who like and make comments, I so appreciate you and just wanted to let you know that. And please, if you have any specific topics that you want me to cover, please let me know. Put it in the comments or send me an email, because I definitely want to serve the needs of what people want and need to hear. Okay, so let's get started. So today I'm going to cover 8 signs that you might be a victim of narcissistic abuse. So the challenging thing about when you're in the midst of something, when you're in the forest of something, you're in that forest of abuse, it's difficult sometimes to see the dysfunction that's actually happening, especially if you grew up in a narcissistic household where this is, so what you think is normal in an unhealthy and toxic relationship, you think it's normal because you grew up in it, and so it feels like resonance. It resonates with you because that's what you believed love to be, because that's what you experienced in your childhood. Okay, so let's get started. So what is the first sign that you may potentially be a victim of narcissistic abuse? The first sign is that you find yourself walking on eggshells. You're in a perpetual state of walking on eggshells, always kind of having a hyper vigilance, paying attention to and editing your behavior and your thoughts and what you say for the people around you or the person around you, because you're very hyper vigilant to make sure that you don't trigger them in any way. So you're constantly, evaluating the situation and moderating your behavior and the things that you say to try to make sure that you're not going to trigger this person, and that there's going to be some kind of backlash for you. So you probably grew up in that environment as a child, where you kind of just never knew when the shit was going to hit the fan, and so you were kind of like hyper aware and things like that. So that is the first sign, walking on eggshells. Now the challenge and the detriment to your physical health is that when you are in a perpetual state of walking on eggshells and your body's in a hypervigilant state, that is extremely draining on your physical body. You will burn out your adrenals. It's going to lower your immune system. And that's part of one of the reasons why, the Gottman Institute found that people who are on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse, when that person speaks down to them with contempt, that person will develop an autoimmune disease, because when you're spoken down to like that, when your body's in a hypervigilant state all the time, it will lower the frequency of your overall body. It's going to weaken your immune system, and that is what will make you more susceptible to autoimmune diseases and such. Okay, so what is the second sign that you might be a victim of narcissistic abuse? So the second sign is that you may have feelings of self-loathing and self-hatred, right? So it's self-loathing and self-hatred. Now the thing is, when you may be feeling these feelings, they may be so buried deep in your subconscious, because nobody, obviously none of us wants to believe that we hate ourselves, right? None of us want to feel like we think we're not enough. But the problem is that if you grew up in a narcissistic family dynamic where you were constantly made to feel bad about yourself, you were constantly put down, there were slights, there were insults, there were the rolling of the eyes, where you were disrespected and things like that, you may develop feelings of self-hatred and self-loathing, because at the subconscious level, and you're not even aware of it. This is the challenge. And to be honest with you, I will share that I discovered I had that, and I didn't discover it, and nobody could have ever convinced me that I had feelings of self-hatred and self-loathing had I not embraced my mala bead practice. It was in the process of doing my daily mala bead practice where I was actually doing for each of the 109 beads, I was doing the Ho'oponopono prayer. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. And I was doing it to my 5-year-old self. I have a picture of my 5-year-old self that I have is kind of my go-to picture when I want to connect with my inner child. And it was only by doing that daily mala bead practice where I truly understood the level of self-hatred and self-loathing that I had for myself because of different experiences that I had in my life, because of partners, family members, bosses, and things like that who would put me down, who would insult me, who felt the need to kind of squash my light. And so as a result of being on the receiving end of that for, several decades, those feelings of self-loathing and self-hatred, were very intense. And I found that when I was doing that mala bead practice, doing that Ho'oponopono prayer for myself, I was bawling and bawling and bawling, and I felt so much shame. And I had to acknowledge that that's where I was at. I did have that shame and self-loathing, and it was awful. And so, just one prayer at a time, just releasing that and healing that. But like I said, I was completely unaware of it. And if anyone would have ever told me you had self-loathing or self-hatred, I'd be like, you are out of your mind. Do you have any idea how many self-care practices I do? Do you have any idea of how many ways I show that I love myself? Yes, there were, it's not like all or nothing, right? Like, it's not like I totally hate myself and there's no element of myself that I do. Of course, I acknowledged my light, but there were also part of me, these repressed feelings that I had stuffed down and stuffed down and stuffed down for so long that I didn't even know they were there. So the first two signs, the first one is walking on eggshells. The second one is self-loathing and self-hatred. And again, you may not even be aware that you have these things, until you start really getting quiet and pay attention and start observing your thoughts and observing the things that go through your mind. And if you find that you speak horribly to yourself and you say the most awful things about yourself, that like, I'm so stupid, I'm incompetent, I can't do this, whatever, those are elements of self-hatred and self-loathing. Okay, so the third one, anxiety and depression. If you are a victim of narcissistic abuse, more than likely you will struggle with feelings of anxiety and depression. The anxiety will be as a result of that constant state of walking on eggshells, never knowing when the shit's going to hit the fan, never knowing when the next blow up's going to happen, never knowing when the next insult's going to be hurled at you when you're not expecting it. And then feelings of depression, because what can happen when you're in a narcissistic abuse situation, the feelings of depression can overtake you when you feel that you are, helpless. You feel like you're stuck there. And when you have been in a long-term relationship with a narcissist, it will destroy your self-confidence. It makes it harder for you to walk away. And so you feel like even trying to get out of the situation feels like an impossibility. And then that will trigger feelings of depression. Now, how do you combat that? What can you do to combat the anxiety and depression? I would highly recommend you can either do energy work, and if you check out my website, Christine Regan Lake, I have a ton of resources explaining to you how trauma gets locked in the body, or else through my YouTube channel as well. I do energy healing sessions to help people release that trauma from the body, because that trauma that's stuck in your body keeps you resonating at a low level, and it keeps that perpetual state of low-level anxiety that you're constantly living in 24/7. So the other thing that you can do in terms of depression, I would recommend getting into a consistent practice of self-care rituals, whether it's daily prayer time, meditation, walks, and doing something. You need to do something. You need to figure out some new way to create a new tape in your head that will show you that you do have a bright, beautiful future worth fighting for, worth living for, that you want to move towards. You need a vision of the future, a strong, positive vision for the future to help you get out of that depression and to help you do the work that is required to release that level of anxiety that you're perpetually in, and to release the neural pathways pathways. So when you are in a habituated state of being depressed, you create neural pathways in the brain. And so we're creatures of habit. So it's your go-to thing is to get depressed. So if you want to release yourself from that depression, you have to create new neural pathways of joy, happiness, laughter, playfulness, and things like that. One of the ways you can do that is with binaural beats. So go on YouTube. There's a ton of videos on binaural beats. You can do binaural beats for joy, happiness. You can specifically pick ones for depression. There's a ton of them out there, but they will help you create the new neural pathways. Some say it takes 21 days. Some say it takes 30. Some say you should do it for 60. You just keep doing them. You need to create healthy rituals every single day that are going to help you rebuild yourself to get out of that anxiety and depression. Okay, so what's the fourth one? So the fourth one is that if you are habitually struggling with the 4 trauma responses of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So fight obviously is when you get triggered and you tend to be a fighter, right? So you're kind of always looking for a fight. If that is a natural response for you, that is a trauma response that you have developed over time. Could have been developed from when you were a child. It could be from, recent events, but either way, you are in that pattern, that energetic pattern of fight all the time. You're constantly looking for a fight. The next pattern you could have would be flight. You are completely, you run away from any kind of conflict. You can't do it. Something gets upset. I'm out of there. I'm just leaving. I'm not participating in this. You're constantly looking to run away, fly away, to get away from whatever that danger is, that emotional danger, the fight, the argument, the conflict, whatever. The next one would be freeze, where you have a freeze response. And I used to have this one a lot too. When someone would get aggressive with me, I would just freeze up, so different scenarios at work where someone is a hothead and they start screaming, I would just freeze. I couldn't move, I couldn't think, I couldn't talk, I couldn't speak, I would just completely freeze up and cramp up. And I couldn't think of a response to say, things like that. So you could have a freeze response, or you could have a fawn response. The fawn response is where you have been habituated to think that whenever there's conflict or whenever you're with someone where you might be concerned about, maintaining that relationship, you fawn all over them, compliments, just fawning all over them, giving them love and affection and attention, because that is your go-to strategy for ensuring that this person won't abandon you, that this person isn't going to get upset with you. So, and it's completely inauthentic, you know what I mean? You're just, because it's just a habituated response. It's not like you're coming from the presence of grace and, sharing a compliment. This is like a triggered reaction for you. And so it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Those are 4 trauma responses that children or people experience when they have been a victim of narcissistic abuse. Okay, so the next one is number 5 is when you are constantly apologizing. And I know that you know these people. And to be honest with you, I used to do this. I used to be, and I may still do it a little bit, but not nearly the way I used to do it. One, I'm an HSP, right? So I'm very conscious of caring about other people and wanting to make sure that I didn't say or do something that might have hurt their feelings or whatever. But I'm talking about, these are the people who they apologize for everything under the sun, and they'll repeat it over and over numerous times. That is a trauma response. Hyper apologizing is a trauma response. That person has been habituated from a very young age to believe that everything is their fault. So if something breaks, it's their fault. If mom and dad are in a fight, it's their fault. Whatever it is. So this person will struggle with incredible feelings of guilt and shame, because whenever anything goes awry in their environment, their immediate response is, oh my God, did I do it? Was it, oh my God, it must be my fault. Whatever. And they take responsibility for things that aren't their responsibility, that wasn't their fault. And so that is a major red flag that you may be a victim of narcissistic abuse, that you constantly apologize for things. And in situations where it's completely inappropriate. And it also, which is really interesting, is that when someone's in that, when someone is in that situation where someone is over apologizing to you, it's a very weird feeling for the people around you, because it's so clear that there's something off with you. You know what I mean? Like, it's so obvious that, like, there's something amiss with you with regard to, like, why do you keep apologizing? Like, it's in, like, please stop. Like, it's like too much already, So be aware of that and start paying attention, whether you're doing it or people are in your environment are doing it for you. And if these are people that you love, try to send them a little extra love and care, because they're struggling. So many people struggle with narcissistic abuse and some of these 8 signs, and they don't even know it. They don't have the presence to be able to see that this is the way they're living. They're so habituated to these trauma responses. Okay, so what's the next one? Number 6 is you are just filled with self-doubt. So whenever, self-doubt in the sense that, like, it's very difficult for you to make decisions. So if you know someone who can be like paralyzed when it comes to making decisions, that is because they are filled with self-doubt. More than likely, they need third-party validation on any decision that they want to make, because they have lost their trust with themselves to know that I know what I need for my life. I know what I need to do to take care of myself and what needs to be done in this situation. So incredible feelings of self-doubt. That self-doubt comes from when you were a child. You probably had parents that were completely overbearing, that made you question everything or didn't let you decide things. They were helicopter parents who made every decision for you, and then you get out on your own, and now when you have to make a decision, you become completely paralyzed. And you need other people to get on board, instead of just being decisive and knowing exactly what you need for your life and what is in alignment with what your soul says is right for you. So if you struggle with tremendous feelings of self-doubt, you have, severe decision paralysis in terms of not being able to make a decision on your own and always needing to get people validating and confirming that you're making the right decision, that be another sign that you may be a victim of narcissistic abuse. Number 7, loneliness. So when you are a victim of narcissistic abuse, what can happen is that when you are being constantly diminished and someone is squishing your light, part of the way that you deal with being in that situation is that you start to disconnect and close off, because it's very uncomfortable to feel those feelings. And because you disconnect emotionally, and you end up disconnecting from people, it will make you feel lonely, because you're not having that heart connection, right? If you have frozen over your heart and you have frozen your emotional body, you don't have, when you do connect with people, it is completely at a surface level connection, and you don't get the soul nourishment that comes from authentically connecting with someone on an emotional level, where there is sharing and there is that intimacy. That emotional intimacy is incredibly nourishing to your soul. And so when you freeze over, when you have frozen your heart, when you have completely, like, the way I always look at it is like almost like pulling a plug out of the wall socket, right? It's like you're completely emotionally disconnecting from your emotional body, and you just completely connect with people from the intellectual level. When you do that, you are going to feel tremendous feelings of loneliness, because we are emotional creatures. We are built for, connection, for human connection, for bonding, for intimacy. And so that may have been your trauma response, was to emotionally disconnect from your body. And I remember specifically around 9/11, right as 9/11 happened, and I had a 6-month-old baby, my son Parker, and I remember like as I was watching like the news footage and all that other stuff, I remember it was almost like a conscious decision, and I was like, I just like unplugged. I was like, nope, I can't. I'm going to look at this from an intellectual experience, because the thought of the evil that it took to do that was too overwhelming to me. And so I said, for my own self-protection, I disconnected my emotional body, and I went into a period of it was really just, it was like self-protection to be able to kind of navigate those next few days as we move forward with that, as all of those things, were being revealed to us. Obviously I plugged back in again, but at that moment, that's what I needed to do to get through that experience. Okay, and then the last one is self-isolation. So self-isolation is a trauma response. And part of what happens is that when you constantly feel under attack by a narcissist, whether it's your boss, your parent, a sibling, your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, when you constantly feel that you're under attack and that no matter what you do, you're always wrong, it becomes quite exhausting. And part of how you deal with that is to self-isolate. And you say, you know what? If they're dangerous, other people are dangerous. And so you start getting suspect of everyone, and you're like, you know what? I have to go into protective mode. I have to like clamp down. I need to go into my, my little armored cave and protect myself, and I'm going to self-isolate. The only problem, not the only problem, but one of the problems with self-isolation is that, obviously when you're self-isolating and you're not getting that human connection, it increases your depression, it increases your anxiety, and it makes the situation even worse. So, if you find that that is your go-to strategy is self-isolation, try to find the strength and the courage to reach out to the people that love you, your friends and your family, coworkers, whatever, to get out and have that human connection. Let them give you a hug, have those beautiful bonding moments of sharing your vulnerabilities, your fears, your dreams and things like that, because that is soul nourishing. And we as human emotional beings, we need that. So those are the 8 signs that you might be a victim of narcissistic abuse. And I'll go through them again. So it's walking on eggshells. You're constantly waiting for the shit to hit the fan. And so you are in hyper vigilant reactive mode, trying to edit your behavior. The second one is feelings of self-hatred and self-loathing. If you do struggle with self-hatred and self-loathing, more than likely you are riddled with guilt and shame, and those are 2 emotional states that constantly bombard your conscious mind, guilt and shame. So those should be the flags for you that you may have some self-hatred and self-loathing that you need to work on and heal. The third one was anxiety and depression. If you feel like your go-to emotional states are a constant state of anxiety, of worry, fear, and anxiety, and or depression, that may be a sign that you are in a narcissistic situation and that you want to try to figure out how to get into a healthier rhythm of your life, whether you may need to quit the job, break up with a boyfriend, get a divorce, whatever it is. The next one is fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, the 4 trauma responses of narcissistic abuse, where you are ready, for fight. You're ready to start a fight with anybody. You're just looking for a fight for anybody that comes across your path. Flight, meaning you run away from any kind of conflict or issue because you are scared. The third one is to freeze, where you may freeze up in situations where someone becomes aggressive with you. You freeze up, you can't think of anything to say, you can't speak, you can't move, you completely just shut down, and like it's paralysis. You are frozen in that moment. And the last one is fawn. If you feel the constant need to fawn over and flood people with compliments and say nice things, those are 4 trauma responses that you want to be aware of, that if that is something that you are doing, that might be another flag for you that you are a victim of narcissistic abuse. Constantly apologizing, that's number 5. If you are in the habit of constantly apologizing for things that you didn't even do, or taking responsibility for mistakes that happen and they clearly weren't your fault, you need to address that, because that's not healthy. It's dysfunctional. I'm all for taking accountability, but I am not for apologizing for things that you didn't do wrong, because that's unhealthy and that's sort of a trauma response. The number 6 is feelings of self-doubt. If you have decision paralysis and you cannot make a decision without other people's input and third-party validations to validate what you want to do in terms of a decision, you might want to consider that you are experiencing narcissistic abuse, and examine the people in your sphere of influence who treat you with that way, who disrespect you, who put you down and make you feel like you don't have what it takes to make the proper decisions for your life. You're an intelligent human being. Your soul knows what is right for you and what you need. And now you need to learn to trust yourself again, because that self-doubt was caused by the people in your environment who made you feel that you were incompetent and couldn't decide for yourself. Number 7 is loneliness. If you struggle with deep feelings of loneliness and disconnection from others, you might be suffering from narcissistic abuse, and you want to reach out and start rebuilding those connections with the people in your life, your friends, your family, coworkers, whatever, to reestablish those emotional connections, the vulnerability and stuff like that, because it is soul nourishing and you do need it. And the final one was self-isolation. If you do find that you are self-isolating, it is not a healthy situation for you. We need more human connection. We need to be out in the world. Getting out in nature will help ground you, will make you feel comfortable. Getting out amongst friends and laughing and joking around will soothe your soul. So self-isolation is destructive. It's good to have quiet time to yourself, but if you are self-isolating to the point that it is triggering even more feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and depression, then that's a problem. So those are the 8 signs that you might be a victim of narcissistic abuse. I hope you found value in that. And again, if you like my videos, I would love it if you could like, share, or subscribe to my channel so I can get these messages out to those who need to hear it. Thanks so much. Have a beautiful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.